What I'm about to share with you today is one of the most fascinating archaeological discoveries to emerge from the British Museum in recent years. A 3,000-year-old clay tablet, covered in ancient cuneiform script. It's been fully decoded, and it appears to reveal the location where ancient Mesopotamians believed Noah's Ark came to rest after the Great Flood. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just about Noah's Ark as we know it from biblical texts. This discovery connects multiple ancient flood narratives, revealing a shared cultural memory that spans civilizations and millennia. The artifact I'm talking about is called the Imago Mundi, literally meaning image of the world, and it's considered the oldest known world map in existence. But calling it just a map doesn't do justice to what this clay tablet really represents. It's a window into how ancient Mesopotamians understood their world, their cosmos, and their most sacred stories. Recent analysis by Dr. Irving Finkel and his team at the British Museum has revealed details that were previously hidden or misunderstood. And what they've found challenges our understanding of how ancient flood stories spread across cultures and civilizations. So buckle up, because we're about to embark on a journey that takes us from ancient Babylon to modern-day Turkey. Through stories of divine intervention, archaeological expeditions, and one of humanity's most enduring myths. Let's start by understanding exactly what we're looking at. The Imago Mundi isn't your typical ancient map, created around 3,000 years ago in Babylon. This clay tablet represents the entire known world from a Mesopotamian perspective. Picture a circular diagram. At the center, you have Babylon itself, represented by the largest rectangle. Running vertically through the map is the Euphrates River, the lifeline of Mesopotamian civilization. The entire known world is surrounded by what the tablet calls the Bitter River, essentially the ocean that ancient peoples believed encircled all land. But here's where it gets fascinating. Beyond this ocean, arranged around the outer edges, are 8 triangular regions. These aren't just geographic territories. They represent the limits of the known world. Places where reality blends with imagination, where the mundane gives way to the extraordinary. In these outer regions, ancient texts describe trees that bear precious stones instead of fruit, giant birds capable of carrying off elephants, and men who are half human, half scorpion. These are the borderlands where myths live, where the impossible becomes possible. And it's in one of these mythical regions that we find a reference to something that would become central to our story, a great vessel. Described with a word that appears in only one other context in all of Mesopotamian literature. The story of the Great Flood. The tablet itself is fragmentary. Time has not been kind to this ancient artifact. Parts of the text are missing, sections have crumbled away, and some portions were lost until archaeologists found matching fragments decades later. But what remains tells an incredible story. Now let's dive into the actual text. The Imago Mundi isn't just a map. It's a travel guide to regions beyond the known world. On the reverse side of the tablet, we find descriptions of what an imaginary traveler would encounter in each of these distant lands. The text is written in cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script pressed into clay tablets while they were still soft. Each of the 8 outer regions is described in detail, though much of the text is damaged or missing. But here's the crucial part. When describing the 4th region, the text becomes very specific. It says that a traveler must journey 7 leagues, about 20 miles, to reach something described as thick as a parsiktu vessel. Now, parsiktu is a fascinating word. It appears nowhere else in Mesopotamian literature except in one context. Descriptions of the ark built to survive the Great Flood. The word seems to refer to the thickness or substantial nature of the vessel's construction. When archaeologists found the missing fragment that contained the inscription Great Wall, they were able to connect it to descriptions on the reverse side of the tablet. This breakthrough allowed them to identify which triangular region corresponded to which textual description. The 4th region, where this substantial vessel is located, points directly toward a place the tablet identifies as Urartu, written in cuneiform characters that clearly spell out this ancient kingdom's name. And here's where biblical scholars get excited. Urartu is the same region the Bible calls Ararat, the mountains where Noah's Ark is said to have come to rest. The linguistic connection is clear. Urartu and Ararat are variations of the same name, referring to the same mountainous region that today encompasses parts of Turkey and Armenia. To understand the significance of this discovery, we need to explore the flood story that the Babylonians knew, a tale that predates the biblical account by centuries and shares remarkable similarities with the story of Noah. In Mesopotamian literature, we encounter not Noah, but Utnapishtim, sometimes called Atrahasis, meaning the extremely wise one. His story appears in multiple ancient texts, including the famous Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis epic. According to these ancient accounts, the gods decided to destroy humanity through a series of plagues, culminating in a great flood. But one god, Ea, opposed this plan. Unable to convince the other deities to spare humanity, Ea took a different approach. He visited Utnapishtim and gave him detailed instructions. Build a great vessel, providing exact specifications for its dimensions. Gather your family, collect the seed of all living things, animals, plants, everything needed to repopulate the world after the waters receded. The parallels with Noah's story are striking. Like Noah, Utnapishtim builds an ark according to divine specifications. Like Noah, he preserves his family and representatives of all living creatures. And like Noah, he sends out birds to determine when the waters have receded enough for safe landing. But here's what's particularly fascinating. The Mesopotamian account includes details that match the biblical narrative almost exactly. Utnapishtim sends out 3 birds. First a dove, then a swallow, then a raven. When the raven doesn't return, he knows the waters have receded. These stories weren't just myths to the ancient Mesopotamians. They were considered historical accounts. The geographic specificity of the Imago Mundi suggests that the Babylonians believed these events actually occurred in real, identifiable locations. The fact that both traditions place the ark's final resting place in the same general region, the mountains of Aratu, suggests either a shared cultural memory of an actual event, or, at minimum, a common literary tradition that influenced both cultures. Let's trace the geographic journey described in the Imago Mundi, according to the tablet, to reach the location of the great vessel. One must travel to the 4th outer region, crossing the Bitter River, the ocean that surrounds the known world. From this mythical outer region, if you were to travel back toward the civilized world, you would arrive at Urartu, the ancient kingdom that encompassed much of what is now eastern Turkey and Armenia. This region is dominated by massive mountain ranges, including the peak that modern maps call Mount Ararat. At over 16,000 feet, Mount Ararat is the highest point in Turkey and would certainly qualify as a place where a massive vessel might come to rest as floodwaters receded. The geographic logic is compelling. In ancient thinking, the highest mountains would be the last places covered by rising waters and the first places to emerge as waters receded. Mount Ararat, towering above the surrounding landscape, would be a natural candidate for such a landing site. What's particularly interesting is how this geography appears in other ancient texts. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, when the hero seeks out Utnapishtim, he must cross the waters of death to reach him. This parallels the Imago Mundi's description of crossing the Bitter River to reach the outer regions where extraordinary things exist. The consistency of these geographic references across multiple ancient sources suggests that this wasn't just random myth-making. There was a coherent geographic imagination at work, placing significant events in specific, identifiable locations. Modern satellite imagery of the Ararat region reveals numerous geological formations that could be interpreted as ancient structures. Some are clearly natural rock formations, but others have sparked debate among researchers and explorers. The mention of Ararat in both biblical and Mesopotamian sources has inspired numerous archaeological expeditions over the past century. Teams from various countries have explored the mountain and surrounding regions, searching for evidence of the legendary Ark. Some of the most systematic work has been conducted by Turkish researchers, including teams from Istanbul Technical University. These expeditions have found evidence of human activity in the region, dating back 3,000 to 5,000 years, roughly the time frame when these ancient texts were being written. Archaeological findings include pottery fragments, tool remnants, and structural foundations that confirm significant human presence in the region during ancient times. However, none of these discoveries provide direct evidence of a massive wooden vessel. The challenges facing archaeologists in this region are immense. Mount Ararat is an active volcanic mountain, meaning any ancient wooden structures would likely have been destroyed by volcanic activity over the millennia. The extreme altitude and harsh weather conditions make systematic archaeological work incredibly difficult. Additionally, the region has been politically sensitive, with restricted access due to its location near international borders. This has limited the scope and continuity of archaeological research. Some expeditions have claimed to find wooden structures at high altitudes, but these claims have been controversial. Peer review and independent verification have been limited due to access restrictions and the challenging conditions. What we can say with confidence is that the region was inhabited during ancient times, that it held significance for multiple ancient cultures, and that it remains a focal point for those seeking to understand the historical basis of flood narratives. Dr. Irving Finkel, the British Museum curator, who has led much of the recent research on the Imago Mundi, offers a fascinating perspective on these discoveries. Dr. Finkel is something of a legend. In Assyriology, the study of ancient Mesopotamian civilizations, and his interpretations carry significant weight in academic circles, according to Dr. Finkel. The Imago Mundi should be understood primarily as a document of imagination rather than empirical geography. In his view, the outer regions described in the tablet represent the limits of Mesopotamian geographical knowledge, beyond which lay the realm of myth and legend. These are not travel reports, Dr. Finkel explains in British Museum videos. These are inherited traditions. Stories passed down through generations about places and events that lay beyond direct experience. This interpretation places the Ark reference in the context of mythological geography rather than historical documentation. The ancient Mesopotamians were unclaiming to have visited the Ark's resting place. They were preserving cultural memories about where such an event was believed to have occurred. Dr. Finkel's analysis suggests that the shared elements between Mesopotamian and biblical flood narratives reflect common cultural traditions rather than independent historical accounts. The stories influenced each other through cultural contact and shared literary traditions. However, Dr. Finkel also acknowledges the remarkable specificity of the geographic references. The fact that multiple independent sources place the Ark in the same general region suggests some form of shared cultural memory, even if that memory doesn't necessarily reflect literal historical events. This scholarly perspective doesn't diminish the importance of the discovery. It contextualizes it. Within our understanding of how ancient peoples constructed meaning through storytelling and geographic imagination, the discovery of the Imago Mundi's Ark reference has generated responses across the spectrum of belief and interpretation. It's important to understand how different communities view this evidence. From a scientific and archaeological perspective, the tablet provides valuable insight into ancient Mesopotamian cosmology and mythology. It demonstrates the sophisticated geographic thinking of ancient peoples and reveals how cultural narratives spread across civilizations. Most academic researchers view the flood narratives as mythological stories that served important cultural functions, explaining natural disasters, establishing moral frameworks, and creating shared cultural identity. The geographic specificity doesn't necessarily indicate literal historical accuracy. However, some researchers argue that the consistency of flood narratives across multiple cultures suggests the possibility of a historical basis. They point to geological evidence of significant flooding events in human history, including the theoretical Black Sea deluge and various river flood events in Mesopotamia. From religious perspectives, the discovery generates excitement among those who view biblical narratives as historically accurate. The fact that ancient Mesopotamian sources independently corroborate the general location described in biblical texts is seen as supporting evidence for literal interpretations. Young Earth creationists particularly embrace archaeological findings that appear to support biblical timelines and events. Some religious communities have funded expeditions to Mount Ararat, based partly on evidence like the Imago Mundi. It's worth noting that many religious scholars take a more nuanced view, seeing value in the moral and spiritual teachings of flood narratives, regardless of their literal historical accuracy. They emphasize the universal themes of divine justice, human responsibility, and redemption that appear across cultures. The ongoing excavations in Turkey continue to generate interest from both scientific and religious communities, though their interpretations of any findings differ significantly. So, what should we make of this remarkable discovery? The Imago Mundi represents something quite rare in archaeology. A convergence of multiple ancient sources pointing toward the same geographic region for one of humanity's most enduring stories. From an archaeological standpoint, this discovery enhances our understanding of how ancient cultures shared and transmitted stories. It demonstrates that the flood narrative was widespread across the ancient Near East, with remarkable consistency in both details and geographic references. The tablet also reveals the sophisticated cosmological thinking of ancient Mesopotamians. Their ability to create coherent geographic frameworks for both empirical knowledge and mythological traditions shows a complex understanding of how to organize and preserve cultural information. For biblical archaeology, the Imago Mundi provides important context for understanding how Hebrew narratives relate to broader ancient Near Eastern traditions, rather than existing in isolation. Biblical texts appear to be part of a rich intertextual conversation spanning centuries and cultures. However, it's crucial to maintain appropriate scholarly caution. Archaeological evidence can inform our understanding of ancient texts and cultures, but it cannot definitively prove or disprove religious claims about historical events. What we can say is that the flood narrative held profound significance for multiple ancient cultures, was preserved with remarkable consistency across centuries, and was associated with specific geographic locations that held meaning for ancient peoples. Ongoing research in Turkey and continued analysis of ancient texts will undoubtedly reveal more about these fascinating connections. Whether one approaches these stories from a religious, historical, or purely academic perspective, they represent some of humanity's earliest attempts to understand catastrophe, survival, and renewal. The Imago Mundi reminds us that ancient peoples were sophisticated thinkers who created complex systems for preserving and transmitting cultural knowledge. Their stories continue to resonate today precisely because they address universal human concerns about meaning, morality, and our place in the cosmos. As new archaeological discoveries emerge and our understanding of ancient cultures deepens, we undoubtedly continue to uncover fascinating connections between the world's oldest stories and the civilizations that preserve them. Thank you for joining me on this archaeological journey. Remember to subscribe for more fascinating discoveries from the ancient world. And let me know in the comments what aspects of this story you found most intriguing.